Hi, welcome to the program. Hi, Doug. Welcome to the program.
Hello, Senya. Good to be with you today.
Let me tell you all a little bit about Doug Turner before we get started. Doug is an awesome human being and an amazing executive coach. So you need to know that first. That's top of the line. And then one of the things that Doug specializes in is outplacement. So he's actually worked with a lot of executives, individual contributors, managers that are in the outplacement phase. I'm going to show you his website, and then we'll be talking about everything having to do with resumes and improving yours in specific details. So here is Doug's website, and he looks very thoughtful, which he is, because I know it turns out I know where he was at the time. But you can go to his website, which is douglasbturner.com. It has about his information, his background, and some of the things that he does. So this is his resume. This is his resume. This is his website. And today we're speaking with Doug. So hi.
Great. Glad to be with you. This is a timely topic, isn't it?
Isn't it? It really is. It really is. Let me start with the belief question. We'll dig into a lot of details. What is it that you believe to be true that others in your field may not believe?
I'll keep it focused on resumes, Senya. I think that people think they don't need a resume until they need a resume. And I don't believe that at all. I think everyone should have a current resume always and keep it current and keep it updated, because you never know when an opportunity is going to come knocking.
That's so true, Doug. Nobody wants to update their resume until it's time. And they might not have updated for 5 years, 10, more.
20. Yeah.
So you should always keep your resume updated. That's what you believe. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Great. So should we launch into it?
Launch into it. We are open to anything from what the resume should look like to what should be in the resume. We're open to individual suggestions for 22-year-olds to suggestions for senior executives and CEOs. We want to hear it all. Please go.
Great. Well, the first point I really want to make is that resumes are still important. Sometimes we think they're not today. There's networking is important, talking to people is important, but this resume, this thing called a resume, is still very important because it distills down who you are, what you're bringing to the table, how you can contribute, and what accomplishments and skills that you've already acquired that can be applicable. So I've worked with hundreds of people on their resumes, and I was the HR officer for my company when I was working, and I have read and reviewed probably thousands of resumes. And the thinking about resumes has changed a little bit, and the way we go about it has changed a little bit. So that's what I wanted to talk about today and emphasize a little bit. We used to create a resume that looked graphically pleasing, that had everything that we needed to say on it, and we'd print it out and have this hard copy and hand it to somebody usually. Or in the really old days, we'd go store to store maybe when we were looking for a part-time job or something and just distribute the resumes. That's not, of course, as we all know, that's not how it works today. Today, as we distribute a resume, generally it goes into a company's database, as all of you know, and before a human ever sees it, algorithms are what's reading it and looking at it and scanning it and including it or putting it in another place that we don't want it to be or something. And so we need to be aware of that and be able to create a resume that still looks pleasing to the eye, but also doesn't throw off the algorithms. And this is a little bit more complicated than we may think, because there is not a standard format of an algorithm that companies use. Every company's is different. Mm-hmm. And so we don't know what the differences are. Some are very sophisticated and some are not. For example, if you have a keyword on your resume that is part of a requirement for the job, if that keyword appears on the second page of your resume and not on the first, some algorithms will read that as dated experience, that it's not relevant and not current. Others just look for it anywhere on the resume, and if they're great, it's there and it's all the same. But we don't know which company has which thing, so we want to be very careful about it. So given that, I have reviewed and helped hundreds of people with their resumes, and I have some pretty strong feelings and views about what should and shouldn't happen on a resume. So I'm just going to share them, and what should we say, Senya? Disregard them at your own peril or something?
That sounds great. That sounds great. Can I start off with two
Sure.
typical thoughts. Does the resume need to be 2 pages?
The resume should not be more than 2 pages ever.
Okay, so 1 or 2 pages.
1 or 2 pages. And my rule for that is don't go to a second page if you don't have enough information to fill it up, at least 2/3 or 3/4 of the way. You don't want to have a page of a resume and then the second page have 1 or 2 lines at the top.
Okay, great.
But as you move through your career, like when I work with college kids coming out of college, I think a 1-page resume is fine because what they're marketing is their schooling, not their work experience so much. So do they need to put that they flipped hamburgers at McDonald's or I worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken? All those, I'm not sure. Maybe, but it depends on where you're. So a 1 page there is fine. But as you progress in your career and accumulate experience, moving to a second page is not wrong, but never, ever, ever more than 2 pages. I don't care how much experience. I got a resume once from an executive that was 7 pages, 9-point font, had everything all the way back. And it was a struggle to hone that down, but we got it down to 2 pages. So that's
awesome. Okay, so as you're hearing from Doug, never more than 2 pages. Only go to page 2 if you're 2/3ing it or filling it up. So stay to 1 or 2 pages. Doug, what about the very top of the resume? So that whole part with the objective and the description or the key skills, do you recommend that? Do you not recommend that?
To me, saying it, the most important part of any resume, the critical real estate on your resume is the top half of the first page.
Okay.
You must make your case there. And so what you see there now, you don't see an objective line at all. Because they all say the same thing when you read it. It's like, I want a job that I can use my skills and progress and make a lot of money, whatever it is that you're working on. So there's 2 pieces in that top half of the first page that are critical. One is a summary paragraph. And it's sort of, you can think of it as sort of the answer to the question in an interview of, Doug, tell me about yourself. The answer to that question is some form of that paragraph. And they can be difficult to write because you're trying to accomplish a lot. You're trying to say who you are, what you bring to the table, what contributions you can make, etc. And then under that, I like to include a section that's called skills or competencies or strengths that are key words that represent things that you're bringing to the table. And that piece is absolutely critical. And because it's sometimes, if and when a human ever gets to read it, sometimes that's all they read. And if they don't see something there like a hook, they won't continue. And the rest of it, the work experience part, is really history. It doesn't really change that much. It's important, but what is important is most critical is that top half of the first page.
What's the best summary paragraph that you know? What does it look like? How long is it? What does it describe?
I'd say it's about maybe 10 sentences.
Okay, so more than 3 sentences. You actually have a chance to talk.
Yeah, not 10 run-on sentences that go on for several lines, but I'd say in a normal Word document and a file, probably maybe 10 to 12 lines in that. Okay, so it's not small, but it's not a tome, half the page. And it's very pithy. You should never, ever use any pronouns on your resume, ever, anywhere, especially in this paragraph. So you don't say, I am a HR professional. You just start by saying HR professional, skilled in the areas of whatever it is, and go on from there. So if you have an I am anywhere on your resume, delete that out and just
I am.
Yeah, suspend grammar for a few minutes while you're doing your resume and just go with that. Okay.
So tell me more, that top summary, since it's the most important part, what does it read like? You said it's a little bit like the tell me about yourself question. What does it say?
Well, it says there's several pieces to it. There is a little bit about who you are in terms of your experience in the realm of work that you're looking for and in, as you're pursuing. I think it's fine to include a few things about your some characteristics about yourself, like I'm detail oriented, not I am, just detail oriented, and problem solver, skilled at project management, bringing home. And then I think if there's an overall accomplishment that's representative of your ability and skill, it's not bad to put it in there either. And you can also include in that the nature of the work that you're looking for, not as an objective per se, but just, looking to contribute to a growing organization in e-commerce or whatever it is that you're looking for. And then the bullet points underneath that in that skills section can echo some of those things and reinforce them, but they can expand on it a little bit too. In fact, Senya, one point I wanted to make with that top part, we always recommend that people customize their resumes for every position that they apply for. And when I say that to the clients I work with, I can just see their eyes rolling like, oh my gosh, that's a pain in the neck. And it is. But what I mean by that is look at the posting or whatever you have for that position. Look at the language they're using there, especially in the qualifications and requirements, and echo that language in that paragraph or in those keywords or phrases. And the reason for that is that the language that the company has used is important to them. It means something to them. And it's likely the language they'll use when they try to search for resumes in their database. Mm-hmm. And so if you have the keywords from their posting on your resume, assuming they actually reflect your skill and experience, right? Then you're more likely to be found in their database through that keyword search, because it's all about keywords and phrases. And sometimes it's very, like, for example, I'll give you an example. So let's say that there's a job posting that says that they want someone who has that's skilled in customer representation. They use those two words, customer representation or customer representative. And on your resume, you have customer service. If I were you, I would change that to customer representative and not use customer service, because you don't know how sophisticated or archaic their databases are, their algorithms for searching is. Some people put familiar with Microsoft Suite, and sometimes that's enough, but sometimes on the posting, if they put PowerPoint, Word, Excel, Access, you may need to put those same words on your resume or you may not have a match. And it's all about matching. In fact, there's an interesting job or a website that I'm sure there's others, but the one I'm familiar with is one that's called jobscan.com. And it's a website you can go where you can upload your resume and you can upload the job posting you're interested in, and it will scan them and tell you what % of a match your resume is to that job posting. And anything about 65-ish% or higher is considered a pretty good match. And it's all about keywords and phrases. And that's how it works. Okay.
So for the new kind of resume, it needs to be, again, 1 or 2 pages. It needs to have the exactly spot on matching top part of the first page, which is that, like you said, the summary paragraph and the skills just below it. And you should really look at that summary paragraph and the skills and make sure it is matching to the specific job description that you are applying for. Yeah.
In fact, what I do, many clients send me the job posting that they're looking for, and I just read it and I highlight things that stand out. And then I look for those things on their resume. And if they're not there and they have those skills and abilities, then I say, hey, let's just make a few changes here. And that's what I mean by customize. It's not a huge rewrite from a blank sheet of paper. It's adjusting your language on your resume to match the posting. And that's easy. Then you just have to remember which version you sent to which company. That's an easy tracking tool.
I've seen people even do their name _position _company. So they send the specific one that they saved it at.
Yeah, that's a great way to save it, So and speaking of saving, I would not recommend you save your resume versions as version 1, version 2, version 3. Because A, you forget about which version is which. And B, if I'm a recruiter and I get version 4, I'm always wondering what version 3 looked like.
Nice. I've also heard that summary section, it's useful to tell me if this is true. It's useful to title it instead of a word summary, which uses up space, as the position that you're going for. So VP of sales, that's common to what you're seeing?
Yeah, it's up to the person. Some people call that summary paragraph a professional summary. They label it as that section, or just a summary, but some people, again, with the strategy of connecting, they take the title of the job they're pursuing and put it there as the heading for that summary paragraph section. And that's just another point of connection.
This is completely new. So 20 years ago, you would never have put product manager or VP of sales, and then below that summary.
Right.
Doug, keep going. Tell us,
Okay.
what else should people do on their resumes?
Okay, so let's back up a little bit to the contact information at the top. It's always good to have your name. Good. You don't see street addresses on resumes anymore. Just city, state, and zip. Because if you post your resume on LinkedIn or on Indeed.com, it's open to the entire world, everything. So you may not want to have your street address there. When you apply for a position, they'll probably ask you for your street address, but you know who you're giving it to at that point. So city, state, and zip. If you're looking for a position outside your geographic area, then I'd recommend you leave the city, state, and zip off altogether, because you don't want the reader to be distracted by the thought of expenses. You want them to get to know you first before they realize that you're not next door. So and then the phone number should always be your cell phone or a number that you control, and only one number. And you don't have to label it phone number or cell phone, because it's clearly a phone number, right? Same with the email address. When I work with college kids, I make sure they look at their email address to be sure it's appropriate. So it's not hotdudeoncampus.com or something like that, because you know how it gets. So you want to make sure that they have something. In fact, I recommend people create an email address specifically for their job search so that all the traffic is related. And then nowadays with LinkedIn, which is a powerful tool, once you have your LinkedIn profile, which is a topic for a whole nother conversation, where you want it, then we always recommend that you put the URL to your LinkedIn profile on your resume at the top. Okay.
So it sounds like my contact info now looks like my name, my email, my phone, and my LinkedIn profile.
And city, state, and zip if you do
If
that.
I want to.
And you usually can get that all on one line if you need to do that. So that's the contact stuff. And then we get into the summary, that top half of the first page. All that critical stuff is there. You want to think about that critical information, that if that's all anyone ever read about you, they would know. And so it's sort of like, what do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room professionally? And that's the kind of stuff that you want to be remembered by. And then we get into the work experience section. And what I recommend is that we put the company, city, state. Sometimes people put a little paragraph describing or explaining what the company is and what it does. I don't like that, because it's not the company's resume, it's your resume. And and if it's a big company, people get it. AT&T, people kind of know what that is, all that. So don't waste the space. And then under the company, city, state, over on the right-hand side, you have the years that you were with that. Some people put months, which is fine. I just like years on the resume. And then under that, you have a title of your most recent title in the chronological resume, which is the most common and most expected, I think. And then under the title, I would put a little sentence or two about the overall duties of that position, so that we get an understanding of the breadth, depth, and scope of what that job was responsible. It's not a job description. It's really 1 or 2 sentences, maybe 3, but not a lot. And then the bullet points that I recommend that follow that are what we call accomplishment statements. Many times what people do is they put the title, maybe a little sentence, and then they list a whole bunch of duties, just things that they do or project they've worked on. I'd recommend you keep those bullet points sacred and keep them to these accomplishment statements. And these accomplishment statements have a bit of a format. The word is always a verb, and it's always past tense. And because these are things you've already accomplished, even if you're still working at the position you're in, they're things that you're already done. And then you take a little bit of space to describe what you did. But the important thing that makes this a powerful statement is then add what resulted from what you did. What impact did this have? And if you can measure it with a nice metric, it makes it all the more strong. But you can't always do that. So sometimes you have to describe what that is. So it's like revised policy manual, decreasing workarounds by 10% or something like that. And it's a pithy little statement just like that, that says that. And the power of those is that these are things you've already done. You wouldn't put it on your resume if it didn't have a successful outcome, right? And so the hiring managers look at that and say, this is what they've done. And they make the inference that you can do that for me too, or stuff like this you can do for me too.
Yeah. So accomplished something, here was the result. That's what each of your bullet points should say for any of the positions.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more recent the position, the more space you take up on your resume. And as you go back in time, you use less and less space, fewer and fewer of those accomplishments. Resumes generally cover 10 to 15 years of experience. And that's how you can hone it and keep it to 2 pages too.
First of all, I asked you this before the show, so I just want to ask it again.
Yeah.
Are you available for resume coaching, resume consulting if people want to reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I'm affiliated with some large outplacement firms now, and so when companies lay people off, they get their severance package, and in that is some kind of outplacement, and then sometimes those companies will send people to me to help them get back on track. The resume, I can help with LinkedIn and all of those kinds of things. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun to do.
Great. And then just as you said, 10 to 15 years, what should you include from past experiences? Should you even list them all on one line? Should you not list them at all? What should you do once you've gone, let's say, 15 years back?
Yeah, the answer to that and anything else is how relevant is it to the job that you're pursuing? For example, I worked with a superintendent from a large construction company, and he had a lot of great experience, and he was looking for another kind of senior superintendent position for a large general contractor. But way back in his history, he had completed an apprenticeship in welding. Mm-hmm. And he was very eager to keep that on, even though it was like 20 years back. But I liked the reasoning he had. He said, I just want to demonstrate that I've been there. I know what it's like to be in the trenches, and I've grown from there into this more senior superintendent position. So I said, great. It was beyond the 15 years, but it made sense to me. But remember that if there's anything that you need to have them know right off, you must find a way to put it in the top paragraph or the keywords. And so when we get down to the end of the resume, past the experience, it's kind of a free-for-all at the end. It depends on how much space you have. I mean, that's where you'd put degrees, education, things that are relevant, to the position. You might include some formal training you've had and other things. Some companies are very into community involvement. And so on my resume, for example, I was on the board of a nonprofit homeless shelter in Fairfax County, Virginia. So I included that because I knew that some companies, particularly if I was applying for something and a company mentioned something about that, I thought that would be good to do. But if it was really important, I would have taken that and put it up in the summary paragraph.
That summary paragraph, you've mentioned it probably about 7 times. I mean, it's that summary paragraph. That's all
yeah.
How long do you think people spend on resumes these days? I've heard all kinds of few-second numbers. What do you think people look?
You mean writing them themselves?
No, looking at them.
Oh, gosh. Well, if they ever get to look at it, remember, some companies have thousands of resumes in their database. And if they do a search and they come up with a pile of maybe 10 or 15, I'd say they maybe read that paragraph in the keywords and phrases, that skill section. If they don't see enough there, they're on to the next one. Mm-hmm. So it varies from thing to thing, but you want that top part to be a hook, to get them to read a little bit more, or at least to put it in the let's look into this further pile. You know what I mean? So.
And just to come back to that top paragraph one more time, I said bullet points throughout. Here's the accomplishment and here's the result. But you'd also mentioned if there's something especially big, you might want to bring that up. So are you actually suggesting that one of your bullet points that might be below, you might want to raise that up if it's actually significant and relevant to the job that you're?
I think so. If it's big enough and it's representative enough of, let's say, for example, you're looking for a manager of e-commerce position or a director of e-commerce, and you have an accomplishment in a prior organization or the one you're in now, where you created the e-commerce space in the company and did that, then I think that's something that might be relevant to put in that top paragraph. Created that, and you wouldn't make it as a bullet point, but it would be a sentence in your summary paragraph, because it's representative and very relevant to what you're looking to what you're pursuing.
Doug, what about for very senior execs? So somebody who's applying to be a CEO, chief operating officer, senior vice president, what additional considerations should they have as they prepare their resume?
People in that stage of their career, networking is probably as important as a resume. And so in those cases, they may be looking at interviewing with the board or interviewing with the executive committee, those kinds of things. And many times those folks have specific things they want to know. And I worked with a person that was looking for the number 2 spot at a major university. And I worked with his resume. We got it to 2 pages, by the way. And in that case, they had very specific things that they wanted addressed. And so we decided in that case, rather than try to jam all that in a resume, we did a very lengthy cover letter. Mm-hmm. Now, generally, cover letters are supposed to be 1 page only with about 3 or 4 paragraphs. But in this case, because they had specific requests, ours went to 2 pages and it was pretty dense. And I was a little nervous about it, but they had these specific things they wanted addressed. And so that's how we accommodated it there.
So in general, for senior leaders, what are some of the additional considerations that they might want to think about?
With regard to a resume, I still think it should be basically what I've said. You may have a longer summary paragraph at the top, mm-hmm. a little bit, and that's fine. And then pick out some representative accomplishments that are specific to the position that you're pursuing. If it's a CFO or some kind of, you'd want CFO-like accomplishments in fact, I have some clients who brainstorm all kinds of accomplishments for each position that they've had. And then when they see the posting, they pick out the ones that are most relevant. And then, so they sort of assemble their resume mm-hmm. Based on the requirements of the position.
Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that you've said before is for a senior level exec, to know what to put into that summary paragraph, it may make sense to speak with other people in that potential company that they're applying to, or in the board, to hear it sounds to me from what you're saying that some of the things may not be written in a job description, yeah. that you may need to find out what they are and then make sure you assemble them into your summary paragraph.
Every circumstance is a little bit different. Sometimes people are working with a recruiter, like an executive recruiter, and they have a lot of information. So there's a lot of gathering of data and doing what I call listening between the lines, to try to ferret out where their pain points are so that you can address them in the resume. But again, at that level, it's generally a discussion, networking, and the resume. The resume is sort of gets you in the door. In fact, that's what the purpose of any resume is it's to get an interview, and then that's where you can elaborate. And by the way, speaking of that, when you prepare a resume with those accomplishments like we talked about, you're also preparing for interviews because you have examples of things that you can share in interviews. All you have to add to the accomplishment statement is the context of it. Mm-hmm. And that's where things like you've heard of a SOAR story.
Or story or sorry story. What else do you have?
Yeah, a SOAR, to me, that acronym is the situation, obstacles, action, result. And the action result is your accomplishment statement. So you're adding the situation and the obstacles you faced, and then using what from your resume. And the truth is, a lot of hiring managers aren't really good interviewers. And so many times they'll use your resume as an agenda for the interview. And they say, oh, I see you've created a new policy manual that made all the difference. Tell me about that. Well, you're in, you just add the situation, the obstacles. Here's what I did. Here's what resulted. And you've got a really good answer. And by the way, those answers are also very good and appropriate for the interviewing technique today that a lot of companies use called behavioral event interviewing, where they want you to tell stories essentially around the competencies or skills that they're looking at. And in that story, they try to determine the breadth, depth, and scope of your experience and with that topic.
Yeah. And you're saying you already prepare yourself for it by making your resume to that and thinking about those situations and obstacles in advance. Doug, what about sometimes people ask, I want to make it a little more personal, my interview a little more personal, or add something in my activities at the very bottom. Is there any point to this, or is there really no?
I would leave all that personal information off. I mean, it's interesting, but it's not relevant. The fact that you ski Black Diamond ski runs at Park City, okay, cool. But, you know, what does that have to do with e-commerce, you know? Now, there's some things that are a bit gray. Like if I just was working with a client yesterday, actually, who's interviewing today for a position, and he noticed on the posting that they're very interested in inclusion, is the word that they use several times. And he sat on an inclusion committee of his current company. And, you know, that's not really job related necessarily. It's more culture company related, but it's relevant, you know, because of the things that he saw. So again, what you put on your resume, how you determine what is important to put on it, depends on what they're looking for and what the posting says. And that helps. And by the way, on education, never ever put dates of your degrees. Okay. Just the fact that you have the degree is enough. Don't put the date. And I'll tell you why. A lot of hiring managers see the date and they can't help themselves. They do a mental calculation and say, oh, he's 53 or he's 60. Now, technically that's probably illegal, right? but don't create that distraction. Just leave the date off. And a lot of times people in the summary paragraph will put, I have 36 years of experience in it. I wouldn't say that either. I would say I have extensive experience. Don't put the number because you're creating a distraction that you don't want. Okay.
Doug, anything else on the resume? Other thoughts that are coming to your mind? Other important considerations as people?
Just some things to think about. What I've talked about primarily here is the most common resume, which is a chronological resume. And that's people who have an uninterrupted job flow of history. There are other kinds of resumes that are appropriate for people who've been out of the job market for a while. Functional resume is something that we think about that. But generally, a chronological resume is the most common and most expected. People, when they see a functional or other resumes, it's not bad. It's just not what they expect, you know, and they look at it a little bit differently. 2-page max, 10 to 15 years. On your resume, don't try this trick of decreasing the font size to get on it.
Okay. What's the minimum font size?
10.
Okay.
10 to 12. I like 11. 10, as the older I get, the smaller that looks, okay? and 12 points seems a little bit, so you're moving into kind of a cartoonish thing. I don't know, it just is a weird thing.
Around 11, okay.
To me, the sweet spot's 11, yeah.
Okay.
Okay?
Anything else?
No, we'll just wrap up where we started. Don't fool yourself by thinking you won't need a resume until you're in a job search. I would always have a current resume and always be thinking as you're working in your current position of the things you're accomplishing, and make a note of those things and what the impact of those accomplishments are, because then you can keep your resume current. And then you can use the data from your resume to update your LinkedIn profile. And LinkedIn has a lot more space on it. You can put all kinds of accomplishments. You can use pronouns, by the way, on LinkedIn, not on your resume, and make it a little bit more conversational. But yeah, I can't tell you how many clients I have or have had who almost apologize. Doug, I really don't have a resume. I haven't had to think about this for 10, 15, 20 years. And I say, okay, that just means you're normal. Okay. So,
but start now.
Yeah. So I'm telling everyone, don't be normal, you know, get it out and brush it up. And it's not as difficult as you think, I think.
Okay. And then our last two questions that we usually ask. As someone's listening to this interview and they say, Doug, you're totally right. I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to do it this week. I'm going to get my resume together, 1 to 2 pages. I got it. The summary, the skills. What would you like that person to keep in mind?
I think, well, I guess the most challenging part of any resume is that top half of the first page. And so it's like writing, you know, it's like writing an essay on a college exam. If you can just write forever, it's easy because you can just, my friends used to call it a blizzard of bull on your thing. Just write it, go. But when you have to hone it down to a paragraph, that's a challenge. And so I would just push through that writer's block and just start writing something. We can always edit it and hone it down, but just write down what you think is important for people to know about you. And it may be good to go through a little kind of a personal branding exercise to decide what it is that you want people, like I said, to remember and think about you when you're not in the room. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
The rest of it is kind of documenting your work history, that, and you can get that from your performance reviews and all that stuff. But the top half is really probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah. I love that phrase that you said earlier on and just repeated. What do you want people to say when you're not in the room? What do you want to have said?
Yeah. Like when you leave room, do you want to say, yeah, that guy was the e-commerce guy, or that guy was, the HR guy, or whatever it is that you want. That's your brand. That's what and you can manage that brand and make it what you want it to be.
Your brand. And the last question, if you could snap your fingers and almost everyone in the world were to take some action, what action would you want that to be?
Well, with regard to the send me their resume and let me work. I think it would be to dust off your resume and look at it and think about what we've talked about here today, and the everything from the algorithms, the company approach to that, the 2 pages, the time frame, and all of those things. Because at the end of the day, the most rewarding thing for me is that when I help people get their resumes together. In fact, I had a client once who created a resume almost from scratch, and she started to cry, and she said, "Doug, is that really me?" And I was like, "Yes, it's all you." That's what it is, because it's a document you should be proud of at the end of the day, because it accurately reflects. In fact, a lot of clients are way too shy, not shy, but way too humble.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, use the word executive in the summary paragraph at the top of someone's resume. And they said, wait, are you sure? Am I an executive? And I said, well, you're a VP. I don't know what that means. That sounds like to me. So anyway, that's what I think it'd be great to dust it off and feel proud of it again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all of this detailed, concrete, almost checklist-like information that we should do. Thank you so much, Doug. Thank you.
All right. Great. Thanks, Anya. Good to see you.
All the best, everybody.
Bye-bye.